Jasmine Taylor froze as the gate agent loudly announced, "Your attire violates our dress code policy." The crowded terminal fell silent. Her fellow passengers, all white and wearing similar outfits, had boarded without issue. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling. "Mom, they won't let me fly." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. The airport should be a gateway to opportunity, not injustice, but what happens when your dreams are grounded before takeoff? Jasmine Taylor had been counting down the days until this moment. At 16, she was not only the youngest finalist in the National Young Scientists competition but also the only black student from her Atlanta high school to ever qualify. The prestigious event in New York represented everything she had worked towards since childhood, a chance to present her innovative aerospace engineering project to industry leaders and university recruiters. "You've got this, Jazz," she whispered to herself, checking her suitcase one final time. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of NASA missions and female astronauts who had broken barriers. Among them was a framed photo of her mother, Denise Taylor, receiving her appointment as one of the first black women to serve as an Inspector General for the Federal Aviation Administration. Jasmine admired her mother's accomplishments but was determined to create her own path. "I want to earn this on my own merit," she had insisted when Denise offered to help with connections in the industry. "Just like you did." The night before her departure, Jasmine meticulously reviewed the airline's website. She printed the boarding pass, checked baggage requirements, and even reviewed the passenger guidelines. Nothing mentioned specific clothing restrictions beyond appropriate attire. Still, Jasmine chose a conservative outfit, dark blue jeans without any rips, a plain navy sweater, and simple sneakers. Professional but comfortable for the 3-hour flight. "You look perfect," her father Anthony said, watching her pack from the doorway. A high school science teacher himself, he had nurtured Jasmine's passion for aerospace engineering since she built her first model rocket at age 7. "Just remember what your mother always says." "I know, Dad," Jasmine smiled, reciting the family mantra. "Excellence isn't just about what you achieve, it's about overcoming the barriers they don't prepare you for." The morning of the flight brought a flurry of last-minute preparations. Denise, already dressed in her FAA uniform for an important inspection later that day, helped Jasmine double-check her presentation materials. "I've loaded the emergency contacts in your phone," Denise said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "And remember what we talked about. When you're traveling while black in this country, stay calm, know my rights, document everything," Jasmine finished. Though only 16, she had already witnessed enough to understand her mother's concerns weren't overprotective, they were necessary survival skills. "I wish it wasn't this way," Denise sighed, straightening Jasmine's sweater. "But I'd rather you be prepared than surprised." Anthony drove Jasmine to Atlanta International Airport 3 hours before departure, allowing extra time for security as Denise had advised. The drop-off was emotional. This would be Jasmine's first time flying alone. "Call us when you land," Anthony said, hugging her tightly. "We're so proud of you, Jazz." Jasmine entered the bustling terminal with confidence. The check-in process went smoothly. The airline representative complimented her organization as she presented her ID and boarding pass. Security was similarly uneventful, though she noticed the TSA agent examining her natural hair after the scanner, something not done to the white woman ahead of her. With 2 hours until boarding, Jasmine found a quiet corner to review her presentation. She barely touched the sandwich her father had packed, nervous energy suppressing her appetite. As boarding time approached, she gathered her belongings and headed to gate A22. The first subtle shift occurred when she approached the boarding area. The smiles that had greeted white passengers turned to neutral expressions when staff noticed her. When she asked a question about the boarding process, the response was curt rather than helpful. Jasmine brushed it off as imagination, until she noticed a pattern forming. White passengers were engaging in casual conversation with the gate agents while she received minimal acknowledgement. As the boarding announcement came over the loudspeaker, Jasmine took a deep breath and joined the line, boarding pass in hand, unaware that her carefully planned journey was about to be derailed in a way she couldn't have prepared for. "Excuse me, miss." The gate agent's voice cut through the ambient noise of the boarding area as Jasmine approached the counter. The middle-aged white man, whose name tag read Bradley Wilson, had been smiling pleasantly at the previous passengers. That smile vanished when Jasmine presented her boarding pass. "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady despite the sudden knot in her stomach. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, confident, professional, just like her mother had taught her. Bradley's eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her jeans and sweater. "I'm afraid your attire doesn't meet our airline's dress code policy for unaccompanied minors." Jasmine blinked, confused. "I checked your website thoroughly. There was nothing about a special dress code. And I'm 16, I have parental permission to travel alone." The white family behind her shifted uncomfortably. Their teenage daughter wore nearly identical jeans, yet they had been processed without comment. "Our policy states that passengers must maintain a professional appearance," Bradley continued, his voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby travelers. "Those jeans are too casual for our premium service." Jasmine glanced around at the other passengers boarding the flight. Multiple white teenagers and adults wore jeans, some even wore sweatpants or shorts. None had been stopped. "Sir, I don't understand," Jasmine said, fighting to keep her voice level. "Several other passengers are wearing jeans. Look at the woman boarding right now." Bradley ignored her observation. "If you have concerns about our policy, you can step aside and wait for my supervisor. The rest of the passengers need to board." People in line began to murmur. Some averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the unfolding scene but unwilling to intervene. Two white businessmen exchanged glances but said nothing. An older white woman behind Jasmine whispered to her husband, "Well, she should have dressed properly." Jasmine felt her throat tighten as Bradley motioned for the next passenger to approach. She stepped to the side, pulling out her phone to search the airline's official dress code. Finding nothing that supported Bradley's claim, she took screenshots as evidence. After 10 minutes of waiting while other passengers continued boarding, a woman in a supervisory uniform approached. Her name tag read Heather Powell. "I understand there's an issue with dress code compliance?" Heather asked, her tone professional but dismissive. Jasmine straightened her shoulders. "Yes, ma'am. I've been told my outfit violates a dress code, but I can't find any such policy on the airline's website. Several other passengers wearing similar clothes have boarded without any problems." Heather glanced at her outfit, then at Bradley, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Our gate agents have discretion to enforce appearance standards," Heather explained without making eye contact. "Bradley has determined your attire doesn't meet our expectations for unaccompanied minors in premium class." "But I'm not in premium class," Jasmine countered, showing her boarding pass. "I'm in economy, seat 23B. Heather's expression tightened. "Nevertheless, the decision has been made. You can either change your clothes or take a later flight." Jasmine pulled up the airline website on her phone. "Can you please show me where this policy is documented? I researched everything before coming." "We don't need to provide documentation," Bradley interjected. "Our conditions of carriage allow us to deny boarding to anyone not properly attired, at our discretion." An uncomfortable silence fell as Jasmine realized what was happening. This wasn't about clothes, it was about her being a young black woman traveling alone. The familiar weight of discrimination settled on her shoulders, something her parents had warned about but she had hoped to avoid. "Final boarding call for Flight 2357 to New York LaGuardia," the announcement echoed throughout the terminal. "Please," Jasmine said, her voice finally breaking. "My science competition starts tomorrow morning. I have to be on this flight." Heather's expression remained unmoved. "You'll need to step aside now. The flight is boarding." As Jasmine watched the final passengers walk past, including a white teenager in ripped jeans and a sweatshirt who boarded without comment, she felt simultaneously numb and hyper-aware. This moment would change everything. "You cannot board this flight," Bradley stated with finality, turning away from her as the boarding gate prepared to close. Jasmine's hands trembled as she dialed her mother's number. Around her, the gate area emptied as the last passengers disappeared down the jetway. The terminal's fluorescent lights suddenly seemed harsh, exposing her isolation in the vast space. "Mom," she whispered when Denise answered, fighting to keep her voice from breaking. "They won't let me on the plane." "What? Why not?" Denise's voice was sharp with concern. "They said my clothes violate their dress code, but Mom, that's not true. White passengers wearing the exact same thing boarded without any problems." The reality of the situation crashed over her as she spoke the words aloud. "Are you still at gate A22? What are the names of the staff who stopped you?" Denise's tone shifted into what Jasmine recognized as her professional voice, calm, methodical, gathering facts. Through the large windows, Jasmine watched ground crew preparing her flight for departure. Each passing minute heightened her panic. "The gate agent is Bradley Wilson. His supervisor is Heather Powell. Mom, what do I do? The competition registration closes tonight. Document everything," Denise instructed. "Take photos of what you're wearing. Note the time. Look around, are there other passengers dressed similarly? Take photos if possible, but discreetly." As Jasmine complied, she noticed a white family with a teenage daughter walking toward another gate. The girl wore jeans nearly identical to Jasmine's. She quickly captured a discreet photo. "I've got everything," Jasmine reported. "But my flight leaves in 20 minutes. Keep me on the line," Denise said. Jasmine could hear her mother moving, keys jingling in the background. "I'm going to try to reach the airline's executive office." While waiting, Jasmine became aware of someone watching her. An elderly black man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes approached cautiously. "Excuse me, young lady," he said softly. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm Michael Barnes. I'm a retired pilot, and what they're doing isn't right." Relief washed over Jasmine at finding an ally. "They said my clothes violate their dress code, but look at what I'm wearing." She gestured to her plain jeans and sweater. Michael shook his head. "I worked for a different airline for 30 years. There's no standard dress code that would prohibit what you're wearing. This is something else." "I know what it is," Jasmine said quietly. "But knowing doesn't help me get to New York." "Maybe I can speak to them," Michael offered. "Sometimes they need to hear it from." He didn't finish the sentence, but Jasmine understood. Sometimes they needed to hear it from someone who wasn't a young black girl. While Denise continued making calls, Jasmine and Michael approached a different airline counter in the terminal, hoping to find an alternative flight. The departures board showed 3 more flights to New York that day, all with available seats, but all significantly more expensive than her original ticket. "I can't afford these," Jasmine whispered, staring at the prices. Her entire savings had gone toward the original ticket and competition registration. Michael suggested returning to Bradley and Heather to see if anything had changed. "Maybe we can reason with them. Offer to buy something at one of the shops if they truly have an issue with your clothes." As they approached gate A22, Bradley spotted them and immediately stiffened. "The flight is closed for boarding," he announced before they could speak. "This young lady has a valid ticket," Michael began, his voice carrying the authority of his years as a pilot. "And there's nothing in her attire that violates any standard airline dress code." Heather emerged from the jetway, closing the door behind her with finality. "Sir, we've made our decision. If you continue to interfere, I'll need to call security." The threat hung in the air. Jasmine knew that escalating the situation could create even more danger, a reality her parents had prepared her for since childhood. "It's okay, Mr. Barnes," she said softly. Thank you for trying. Through the window, Jasmine watched as her flight pushed back from the gate. With it went her chance to present at the competition she had worked toward for years. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of Bradley and Heather. Jasmine? Her mother's voice came through the phone still clutched in her hand. Stay right where you are. I'm coming. But as the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Jasmine wondered if even her mother, as powerful as she was in her role, could fix what had already been broken. Her dreams seemed to be flying away without her, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of injustice on a day that should have been filled with promise. Denise Taylor ended her call with Jasmine and immediately shifted into action mode. 20 years in aviation oversight had prepared her for crises, though none had ever been so personal. She dialed a direct number few people possessed, the private line to Thomas Anderson, Public Relations Director for National Airways. "Tom, it's Denise Taylor," she said when he answered, her voice professionally neutral despite the rage building inside her. "Denise. It's been a while. How can I help the Inspector General's office today?" His tone was friendly, comfortable, the voice of someone who had no idea what storm was about to hit. "My 16-year-old daughter was just denied boarding on Flight 2357 to New York. The gate agent claimed her clothing violated your dress code, despite numerous white passengers in identical attire boarding without issue." A pause. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Our staff are thoroughly trained on." "Tom," Denise interrupted, "I've known you for 15 years. We both know what this is. My daughter is missing a national science competition because your gate agent decided a black teenager in jeans wasn't acceptable, while white passengers in jeans boarded without comment." The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. "Let me look into this immediately. Which gate was this?" "A22. The agent's name is Bradley Wilson." His supervisor, Heather Powell, backed his decision rather than correcting it. Denise was already in her car, navigating through Atlanta traffic toward the airport. She toggled between calls, Thomas, the airline's regional director, her husband Anthony, and most importantly, Jasmine. "I need you to stay calm and stay visible," she instructed her daughter. "Remain in the main terminal area. Don't let them move you to a private room under any circumstances." Meanwhile, at the airport, Jasmine had found an uneasy sanctuary at a charging station near her gate. Michael Barnes remained with her, his presence a buffer against further confrontation. As they waited, Jasmine noticed a young Latina airline employee watching them from behind a counter. After several minutes, the woman approached. "I'm Alexandra Rivera," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no coworkers were watching. "I work customer service for the airline. What happened to you wasn't right." Jasmine looked up, surprised by the unexpected ally. "They said my clothes violated their dress code." Alexandra's expression hardened. "I've been here 3 years. There is no dress code that would prevent you from boarding in what you're wearing. Bradley has done this before." "Done what exactly?" Michael asked. "Found reasons to deny boarding to passengers of color, especially young women traveling alone." Alexandra hesitated, then continued. "I've documented several incidents but was told to keep quiet if I wanted to keep my job." She slipped Jasmine a folded piece of paper. "This is the contact information for passenger advocacy groups. And here's something else you should know, Bradley flags certain passengers in the system with a special code. Every passenger he's flagged has been a person of color." The revelation sent a chill through Jasmine. This wasn't an isolated incident but a pattern. While Jasmine gathered evidence, Denise continued working the problem from her end. She had escalated to the airline's vice president of operations, citing potential violations of federal anti-discrimination laws. "This isn't just about my daughter," she told him. "This appears to be a systemic issue that falls under FAA oversight. I'm heading to the airport now, not just as a mother, but in my official capacity." Have you ever been in a situation where you knew you were being discriminated against but felt powerless to prove it? Comment number 1: if you believe more needs to be done to address racial discrimination in the travel industry. Hit that like button if you think companies should be held accountable for the actions of their employees. And subscribe if you want to see more stories about people fighting back against injustice. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's shoes? Would you stay quiet to avoid trouble, or stand up for your rights even if it meant missing your flight? And what happens when Denise arrives at the airport to confront the people who discriminated against her daughter? The power dynamics are about to shift dramatically. Denise Taylor arrived at Atlanta International Airport precisely 47 minutes after Jasmine's call. She hadn't changed out of her FAA uniform, the navy blue suit with gold insignia that marked her authority within the federal aviation system. Her credentials hung around her neck, though she deliberately tucked them inside her jacket. This confrontation would begin on even ground. The main terminal bustled with afternoon travelers, oblivious to the storm brewing at Gate A22. Denise spotted Jasmine immediately. Her daughter sat straight-backed on a bench, flanked by an elderly gentleman and a young airline employee. The posture was one Denise recognized from family photographs across generations, Taylor women facing adversity with dignity intact. "Jazz," she called, quickening her pace. Mother and daughter embraced briefly, communicating volumes in the tight grip they shared. "Mom, this is Mr. Barnes. He's been helping me. And this is Alexandra, who works for the airline." Denise acknowledged them with grateful nods before turning toward the gate counter where Bradley Wilson was processing standby passengers for the next flight. He hadn't noticed her arrival. "Mr. Wilson," Denise stated clearly, approaching the counter. Her voice carried the weight of 20 years in federal service, authoritative without being aggressive. Bradley looked up, his customer service smile freezing when he saw Jasmine standing behind the well-dressed black woman addressing him. "Yes. How can I help you? I understand you denied boarding to my daughter approximately 1 hour ago, citing a dress code violation." Bradley's expression hardened into practiced neutrality. "Ma'am, our airline has clear policies about appropriate attire, especially for unaccompanied minors." "I'd like to see that policy, please," Denise requested, her tone professional but unyielding. "I don't have that documentation at the gate. You'll need to contact customer service." Bradley's dismissive gesture toward the main terminal was clearly intended to end the conversation. "That's interesting," Denise replied, "considering you used this undocumented policy to prevent my daughter from attending a national science competition." She glanced at the white family being processed, their teenage son wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt. "Your selective enforcement is concerning." Bradley's jaw tightened. "If you have a complaint, you're welcome to submit it through proper channels. Now, I have passengers to assist." "Bradley," Heather Powell intervened, hurrying toward them. She'd clearly been alerted to the situation. "I can handle this matter. Why don't you take your break now?" Bradley hesitated but retreated under Heather's pointed stare. Heather turned to Denise with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I apologize for any misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." She gestured toward a side door marked, "Staff Only." "I believe the terminal is appropriate for this discussion," Denise replied calmly. "Transparency seems important given the circumstances." Heather's smile thinned. "We take customer concerns seriously, but gate agents have discretion regarding passenger attire and behavior. If your daughter would like to be rebooked on a later flight, we'd be happy to waive the change fee as a courtesy." "A courtesy," Denise repeated, the word hanging in the air between them. "My daughter was denied equal treatment under federal transportation laws. That's not a customer service issue, it's a civil rights violation." The word violation caught Heather's attention. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she reassessed Denise. "You seem very familiar with aviation regulations, Ms. Taylor." "Denise Taylor." She let the name stand alone, watching for recognition. When none came, she continued. "I'd like to speak with the regional manager now, please. Mr. Sutton is extremely busy with." I'm sure he is, Denise interrupted smoothly. But I suspect he'd want to address this situation personally. Something in Denise's tone finally penetrated Heather's professional veneer. She studied Denise more carefully, taking in the uniform she had initially overlooked in her haste to contain the situation. You work for the FAA? Heather asked, her voice losing its confident edge. Denise reached inside her jacket and withdrew her credentials, letting them hang visible now. I'm the Federal Aviation Administration's Inspector General for the Southeast region. And yes, I'd like to speak with James Sutton immediately. The color drained from Heather's face. Around them, passengers had begun to notice the confrontation, several openly recording with their phones. The power dynamic had shifted seismically. Within minutes, James Sutton appeared, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit that marked him as upper management. His face was fixed in crisis management mode, serious but attempting to project calm. Inspector General Taylor, he greeted her, extending his hand. I understand there's been an unfortunate situation with your daughter. Let me assure you that National Airways takes these matters extremely seriously. Serious enough that you've already reviewed the security footage from this gate over the past hour? Denise asked, not accepting the handshake. Sutton faltered momentarily. I've been briefed on the general circumstances. Then you're aware that multiple white passengers in jeans and casual attire boarded without issue, while my daughter was singled out and denied boarding for wearing nearly identical clothing. These situations can appear differently depending on perspective, Sutton began, his voice lowering to avoid being overheard by the growing audience of curious travelers. I'm prepared to offer a complete refund of your daughter's ticket, plus a voucher for future travel. We could even arrange private transportation to New York today. Mr. Sutton, Denise replied, matching his quiet tone but sacrificing none of her intensity, this isn't about compensation. This is about a pattern of behavior that violates federal anti-discrimination statutes in transportation. For the first time, real concern flickered across Sutton's face. Pattern? I assure you, if there was an error in judgment today, it was an isolated incident. Alexandra stepped forward, clutching a tablet. Sir, that's not accurate. Her voice trembled slightly, but her resolve was evident. I've documented 12 similar incidents at this terminal in the past 3 months. Sutton's expression darkened as he turned to Alexandra. This is not appropriate, Rivera. You need to return to your assigned position immediately. Actually, Denise interjected, Ms. Rivera appears to be providing evidence relevant to a federal investigation. Interfering with that could be problematic. Investigation? Sutton's voice rose slightly. There is no investigation. This is an internal airline matter that we're willing to resolve generously. The growing tension was interrupted by the arrival of security officers, summoned by someone during the confrontation. 2 uniformed men approached cautiously. Is there a problem here? The lead officer asked, looking between Denise and Sutton. Sutton seized the opportunity. Yes. These individuals are disrupting airport operations. I've attempted to resolve their concerns, but they're creating a disturbance in the terminal. The security officer turned to Denise, clearly preparing to ask her to leave, when his eyes fell on her credentials. His demeanor shifted instantly. Inspector General, he acknowledged with a slight nod. How can airport security assist the FAA today? Sutton's face registered shock as he belatedly understood the full scope of his miscalculation. He had attempted to remove a federal inspector general from the premises while she was investigating potential civil rights violations. I believe Mr. Sutton and I need to continue our discussion, Denise stated calmly. Perhaps in his office, with representatives from your legal department present. The terminal had grown noticeably quieter as the confrontation unfolded. Dozens of passengers openly recorded the exchange on their phones. Jasmine stood tall beside her mother, witnessing firsthand how systems of power could be challenged by those who understood them intimately. This doesn't require legal, Sutton attempted, his composure cracking. We can resolve this with a simple accommodation for your daughter. This stopped being about my daughter the moment we identified a pattern of discrimination, Denise corrected him. Now it's about every passenger who has been denied equal treatment by your airline. As if to punctuate her statement, Jasmine's phone chimed with a notification. The first social media posts about the confrontation had already begun circulating online, complete with video footage and the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. The battle lines were drawn. What had begun as one teenager's denied boarding had escalated into a potential federal case with national implications. And neither Denise nor Jasmine Taylor was backing down. Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private, James Sutton suggested, eyeing the growing crowd of onlookers with barely concealed anxiety. I believe that's what a mess. Powell suggested earlier, Denise replied evenly. And my answer remains the same. Transparency is essential when addressing potential civil rights violations. Sutton's jaw tightened. Security, he called to the officers standing nearby, please ensure these individuals don't disrupt other passengers. The lead security officer, whose name tag read Rodriguez, looked uncomfortable. Sir, the Inspector General has jurisdiction here. Unless there's a specific security threat, we take direction from federal authorities in these matters. This is still my terminal, Sutton insisted, his composure fracturing further. And I'm requesting assistance with disruptive individuals. Officer Rodriguez glanced at his partner, then back to Denise. Ma'am, would you and your party be willing to move to the conference room near Security Checkpoint B? It would provide privacy while still being a neutral location. Denise considered the offer. That would be acceptable, provided Ms. Rivera and Mr. Barnes are permitted to join us. Absolutely not, Sutton interjected. Rivera is an airline employee currently abandoning her post. She'll face disciplinary action for this breach of protocol. Alexandra paled but stood her ground. Sir, I'm exercising my rights as a whistleblower under federal transportation safety statutes. The technical term caught Sutton off guard. It was clear he hadn't expected a customer service representative to be versed in federal employment protections. The conference room, Denise agreed, turning toward Jasmine and their allies. Officer Rodriguez, would you please escort us there? And perhaps arrange for access to the security footage from Gate A22 for the past 3 hours. As they walked through the terminal, Jasmine noticed people pointing and whispering. Several held up phones, recording their procession. The story was spreading in real time. The airport's conference room was sterile and impersonal, with a long table surrounded by uncomfortable chairs. As they settled in, Alexandra carefully placed her tablet on the table. I should begin by stating that I've been documenting these incidents for 11 months, she said, her voice steadier now that they were away from the immediate threat of Sutton's authority. Initially, I noticed a pattern with certain gate agents, particularly Bradley Wilson. He would scrutinize passengers of color more closely than white passengers. She unlocked her tablet and opened a spreadsheet. I've recorded dates, times, flight numbers, and descriptions of passengers who were denied boarding or given additional screening that white passengers didn't receive. In 68% of cases, the stated reason was dress code violation, despite no clear violation being apparent. Sutton attempted to interrupt, but Denise raised her hand. Please continue, Ms. Rivera. Last month, I discovered something while covering for a colleague at the gate computer. Alexandra's voice lowered. Bradley has been flagging certain passengers in our system with a special code, DR7. When I asked about it, he claimed it was for security precautions. But every passenger with that code has been a person of color. The conference room door opened, and a woman in a crisp business suit entered, flanked by 2 men in similar attire. I'm Claire Davidson, Corporate Vice President of Operations, she announced without preamble. Her voice carried the clipped precision of someone accustomed to crisis management. I've been briefed on the situation and have joined via video conference from headquarters. She gestured to the men beside her. Our legal counsel and head of security operations. Whatever concerns you have, Inspector General Taylor, we're prepared to address them fully. Ms. Davidson, Denise acknowledged with a professional nod. We were just reviewing evidence of potentially discriminatory practices at Gate A22. Before we continue, Claire interrupted, I'd like to offer an immediate solution for your daughter. We have a corporate jet preparing for departure to New York within the hour. She could be at her competition this evening, with our sincere apologies and full accommodation. Denise and Jasmine exchanged glances. The offer was tempting, the competition meant everything to Jasmine. But they both recognized the strategy, separate the personal grievance from the systemic issue. While I appreciate the offer, Jasmine said before her mother could respond, finding courage in the unfolding events, this isn't just about me anymore. What about the next black girl who gets stopped for no reason? Or the next passenger who doesn't have an FAA Inspector General for a mother? Pride flashed in Denise's eyes as Jasmine continued, I'd rather miss my competition than accept special treatment while the real problem goes unaddressed. Claire's practiced smile faltered slightly. She hadn't expected resistance from the teenager. A principled position, she acknowledged. Nevertheless, the offer stands. The door opened again, and Officer Rodriguez entered with a security technician carrying a laptop. We have the footage you requested, Inspector General. The technician set up the computer, cueing the security video from Gate A22. The footage was crystal clear, showing Bradley and Heather processing passengers for Jasmine's flight. As they watched, the discrimination became undeniable. White passengers in jeans, sweatpants, and casual attire passed through without comment, while Bradley stopped a black businessman to question his laptop case, delayed a Latina mother traveling with children for additional verification, and ultimately denied Jasmine boarding. This is exactly what we train our staff not to do, Claire stated, her expression hardening as she watched Bradley's pattern of behavior. This is clearly unacceptable. Yet it happened, Denise countered. And according to Ms. Rivera's documentation, it's happened repeatedly. As if on cue, Michael Barnes cleared his throat. While we've been sitting here, I've been messaging with my network of retired airline employees. 7 have come forward with similar observations about this terminal, dating back 18 months. Claire exchanged glances with the legal counsel, who nodded slightly. We take these allegations extremely seriously, she said. Bradley Wilson and Heather Powell will be placed on administrative leave immediately pending a full investigation. That addresses the individuals, Denise acknowledged, but not the system that enabled them. Ms. Rivera's discovery of coded flagging in your passenger system suggests this goes beyond a few problematic employees. The corporate security director leaned forward. I wasn't aware of any DR7 code in our system. That's not standard procedure. Alexandra looked nervous but determined as all eyes turned to her. I have screenshots, she offered, pulling up images on her tablet. And I can show you how to find it in the database. As the evidence mounted, Jasmine's phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. The incident had gone viral. News outlets were picking up the story, with headlines emerging about discrimination at national airways. Several of the passengers who had witnessed the confrontation had shared their videos online, where they were rapidly accumulating thousands of views. You should see this, Jasmine said quietly, showing her mother the trending topic on social media. #FlyingWhileBlack had already generated over 20,000 posts in the last hour. Claire Davidson's composed facade cracked slightly as she viewed the screen. Our PR team will need to issue a statement immediately, she murmured to the legal counsel. Before you craft that statement, Denise advised, you should know that this isn't the first discrimination complaint I've received about National Airways. My office has documented 17 formal complaints in the past year alone, 9 specifically mentioning Gate A22 at Atlanta International. The revelation landed like a thunderbolt in the room. This wasn't just about Jasmine or even Bradley Wilson's actions today. This was a systemic failure that had affected countless passengers, one that the FAA had already been monitoring. There's something else you should know, Alexandra added, her voice trembling slightly. I found social media connections between Bradley and several known white supremacist groups when I was trying to understand his pattern of behavior. The corporate representatives exchanged alarmed glances. The situation had escalated from a customer service issue to a potential public relations disaster, and now possibly to an extremism concern within their staff. As the evidence continued to mount, the balance of power in the room had shifted completely. What had begun as one teenager being denied boarding had uncovered a systemic problem that could no longer be contained or dismissed. And for Jasmine, watching her mother navigate this complex situation with such authority and purpose, it was a masterclass in turning personal injustice into meaningful action. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since being denied boarding, Jasmine felt something beyond anger and disappointment. She felt hope that real change might come from this terrible day, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. The conference room had transformed into an impromptu command center. 2 hours into what Claire Davidson had hoped would be a quick resolution, it was clear they were now dealing with something much larger. Additional airline representatives had arrived, including the company's diversity and inclusion officer, hastily flown in from headquarters. "What I don't understand," Denise said, reviewing the mounting evidence, "is how this level of discrimination could continue undetected by your oversight systems." Claire exchanged glances with her legal team before responding. "We have anonymous reporting channels and regular audits. Nothing flagged these incidents at a systemic level. Because the system itself is designed to hide them," Alexandra interjected, then seemed surprised by her own boldness. Since providing her initial evidence, she had grown more confident. "The DR7 code doesn't appear in any training materials or official documentation. It's passed between certain gate agents verbally." "What exactly does DR7 stand for?" asked the airline's newly arrived chief of security, who had been silently taking notes. Alexandra hesitated. "Officially, nothing. But I overheard Bradley once refer to it as demographic risk, level 7. It's used to flag passengers for additional scrutiny without leaving obvious evidence of profiling." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't merely individual bias but an organized system to discriminate while evading detection. "I need to make a call," Denise said, stepping away from the table. In a quiet corner of the room, she dialed a number rarely used except in the most serious circumstances. "Lawrence Johnson, Civil Rights Division," answered a deep voice. "Lawrence, it's Denise Taylor at FAA. I need FBI involvement on a situation at Atlanta International. We have evidence of organized racial discrimination by airline personnel, including potential connections to extremist groups." The conversation was brief but productive. Within 20 minutes, FBI agent Lawrence Johnson arrived, his presence adding another layer of federal authority to the proceedings. Tall and imposing in his standard-issue suit, Johnson had spent 15 years investigating civil rights violations across the Southeast. Inspector General Taylor, he greeted Denise with professional respect before addressing the room. "I understand we're looking at potential violations of federal transportation anti-discrimination laws, possibly coordinated across multiple employees." Claire Davidson paled visibly. What had begun as a customer service issue was now a federal investigation with potential criminal implications. While the adults continued their discussions, Jasmine had been quietly working on her phone. "Mom," she said during a brief break, "I've connected with 15 other passengers who experienced similar discrimination in the past month alone. They're sharing their stories online using the hashtag." Jasmine showed her mother the rapidly growing social media movement. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had evolved into a platform where passengers of color were sharing their experiences of discrimination across multiple airlines. Jasmine's incident had become a catalyst for a much larger conversation. "There's more," Jasmine continued, scrolling through messages. 3 former National Airways employees have reached out. They say they were fired after reporting discriminatory practices. Each received settlement payments with non-disclosure agreements. Agent Johnson leaned forward, suddenly more interested. Those NDAs may not be enforceable if they're concealing civil rights violations. Can you connect me with these individuals? As Jasmine facilitated these connections, Alexandra continued providing technical evidence from the airline systems. She demonstrated how the DR-7 code functioned, revealing that it had been used to flag over 200 passengers in the past year at the Atlanta terminal alone. The code triggers a secondary review protocol that isn't documented in our official procedures, she explained, navigating through the booking system. It prompts gate agents to find a non-protected reason to deny boarding or create additional screening. Non-protected reason, the airline's legal counsel asked, visibly concerned. It means finding a justification that isn't obviously discriminatory, Alexandra clarified. Dress code violations, attitude concerns, documentation questions, reasons that seem legitimate on paper but are applied selectively. Claire Davidson had been on multiple calls with corporate headquarters throughout the afternoon. She returned from her latest conversation with a new sense of urgency. Our board has convened an emergency session, she announced. They've authorized me to take immediate action. Bradley Wilson and Heather Powell are suspended effective immediately, pending termination proceedings. We're launching a comprehensive review of all gate procedures and coding systems. That addresses the symptoms, Denise acknowledged, but not the cause. This level of coordinated discrimination suggests a cultural problem within the organization. Agent Johnson nodded in agreement. My preliminary assessment supports that conclusion. We'll need access to all personnel records, communications, and training materials. This investigation will be thorough. Outside the conference room, the story continued to spread. Major news networks had picked up the incident, with live reporters stationed throughout the terminal. Social media engagement had exploded, with celebrities and public figures weighing in on the controversy. National Airways stock had dropped 7% in after-hours trading as investors reacted to the potential scandal. Michael Barnes, who had remained a steady presence throughout the proceedings, shared a disturbing observation. I've been in touch with my network of retired aviation professionals, he said. This DR-7 code isn't unique to National Airways. Similar coding systems have been reported at 3 other major carriers. The revelation shifted the scope of the investigation yet again. What had begun as one teenager being denied boarding had uncovered not just an airline problem, but potentially an industry-wide issue of systemic discrimination. As evening approached, Claire Davidson made another offer. We have a corporate jet still standing by. We can get Jasmine to New York tonight, with appropriate compensation for the distress caused today. Jasmine looked at her mother, then at the room full of federal investigators, airline executives, and allies who had emerged throughout this extraordinary day. Her science competition, the goal that had started this journey, suddenly seemed distant compared to the movement she now found herself part of. I appreciate the offer, she said with newfound confidence, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be right now. This is bigger than my competition. This is about changing a system so no one else has to go through what happened to me today. The decision wasn't easy, she had worked toward the competition for months. But in that moment, Jasmine understood something profound about justice and priorities. Some battles were worth missing opportunities for, especially when they could create new opportunities for countless others. As the investigation continued into the evening, a pattern of deliberate discrimination emerged that was impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents or individual bias. What Jasmine had experienced was the visible tip of an iceberg of systemic discrimination that had affected thousands of passengers across multiple airlines. The question was no longer whether discrimination had occurred, but how deep it went, how many were involved, and what it would take to create real, lasting change in an industry that had allowed these practices to flourish in the shadows for too long. By 8 o'clock that evening, the conference room had transformed into an impromptu command center for what was now officially a joint FAA-FBI investigation. The airline's corporate attorneys had arrived from headquarters, ashen-faced as they reviewed the mounting evidence. Outside, media vans lined the airport access road, their satellite dishes broadcasting live updates to a nation increasingly engaged with the unfolding story. National Airways' PR team had released a carefully worded statement acknowledging concerns about passenger treatment and promising a thorough review of policies and procedures. The corporate response, crafted to minimize legal exposure, had only fueled public outrage as it conspicuously avoided addressing the racial discrimination at the heart of the controversy. "Your statement isn't helping," Denise informed Claire Davidson as they reviewed the public reaction. "It reads as corporate evasion rather than accountability." Claire, who had been fielding non-stop calls from increasingly panicked board members, looked exhausted. "Our legal team insisted on that language. The board is split between those who want full transparency and those concerned about shareholder liability." "The liability already exists," Agent Johnson pointed out. "The question now is whether National Airways wants to be seen as part of the problem or part of the solution." The airline's emergency board meeting had been ongoing for hours, with executives joining remotely from across the country. The stakes had escalated dramatically as evidence mounted. Alexandra's documentation had revealed that the DR-7 code had been used to flag over 500 passengers in the past year across multiple airports, with 93% being people of color. 3 former employees had come forward, breaking their NDAs to provide testimony about discriminatory practices they had been fired for reporting. Security footage from 6 different gates showed a clear pattern of selective enforcement against passengers of color. Most damaging of all, investigators had discovered a private messaging group where certain gate agents, including Bradley Wilson, explicitly discussed techniques for preventing minorities from boarding while avoiding discrimination claims. "The board needs to make a decision," Claire said, ending yet another tense call. "Our stock is in freefall. We're facing boycott threats." And the first class action lawsuit was filed 20 minutes ago. While the corporate crisis unfolded, Jasmine had become the unexpected face of a movement. Her composed resilience throughout the ordeal had resonated with millions following the story online. From the conference room, she had participated in video interviews with major news outlets, articulating the issue with a clarity that belied her 16 years. "This isn't about one flight or one competition," she told a CNN reporter via video call. "This is about whether we truly have equal access to transportation in America. When someone can be denied service because of their skin color, we haven't come as far as we think we have." Her words had struck a chord. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had evolved into hashtag #TravelingWhileBlack, then simply hashtag #ExistingWhileBlack, as thousands shared their own experiences of discrimination across various sectors. Michael Barnes had become an important ally, leveraging his decades in the industry to connect investigators with other aviation professionals who had witnessed similar practices. His testimony carried the weight of someone who had seen the airline industry from the inside, confirming that what Jasmine experienced wasn't an anomaly but a manifestation of long-standing patterns. "In 30 years of flying, I saw this happen countless times," he explained to investigators. "But there was never a mechanism to address it systematically. Complaints were handled individually, settlements were paid, NDAs were signed, and nothing changed." Alexandra's role had proven crucial as well. Despite risks to her employment, she had provided investigators with unprecedented access to internal systems, revealing how discrimination had been encoded into seemingly neutral procedures. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she told Denise during a brief break. "When I saw what happened to Jasmine, a teenager just trying to attend a science competition, something broke inside me. That could have been my little sister." By 9 o'clock, the situation reached a breaking point. Claire Davidson received the call everyone had been waiting for, the board's decision on how to proceed. "They've voted," she announced, returning to the conference room. Her expression was unreadable as all eyes turned to her. "By a narrow margin, the board has authorized me to implement a comprehensive response." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Bradley Wilson and Heather Powell are terminated, effective immediately. James Sutton is suspended pending further investigation. The DR-7 code is being purged from our systems across all airports." These were significant steps, but Denise knew they addressed only the surface issues. "And the systemic concerns?" she pressed. The board has approved the creation of an independent oversight committee with full access to our operations, including gate procedures, training, and hiring practices. We're requesting that the FAA and Department of Transportation appoint representatives to this committee." Agent Johnson nodded appreciatively. "That's a start. And the passengers who have been affected by these practices? We're establishing a compensation fund for verified cases of discrimination," Claire continued. "And we're voluntarily releasing all former employees from NDAs related to discrimination complaints." These were unprecedented concessions from a major airline, a recognition that the evidence was too compelling to fight and that the public relations damage of prolonged resistance would be catastrophic. As the meeting continued, Jasmine received an unexpected call. The organizers of the National Young Scientists competition had been following the news. In an extraordinary decision, they had voted to allow Jasmine to present her project virtually the following day, acknowledging the exceptional circumstances that prevented her attendance. "They're making an exception for me," Jasmine whispered to her mother, tears finally breaking through her composed exterior. After hours of focusing on the larger issues, this personal validation touched her deeply. "I still get to present my project." Denise embraced her daughter, recognizing the complex emotions behind those tears, relief about the competition mixed with the exhaustion of confronting systemic racism at such a young age. It was a burden no 16-year-old should have to carry, yet Jasmine had done so with remarkable grace. As midnight approached, the immediate crisis had evolved into a structured investigation. Agent Johnson and his team had established a protocol for collecting additional evidence and testimonies. The airline had committed to significant reforms. And Jasmine, against all odds, would still participate in her competition. Yet everyone in that conference room understood that this was merely the beginning. The systems that had allowed such discrimination to flourish remained largely intact across the industry. The real work, the long, difficult process of creating genuine equity in American transportation, was just beginning. For Jasmine, the day had transformed her understanding of justice. What began as a personal injustice had revealed a broader truth. That change rarely comes from institutions voluntarily examining themselves, but from individuals brave enough to stand their ground when facing discrimination. As she prepared notes for her science presentation, scheduled for the following morning, Jasmine reflected on how differently this day had unfolded from what she had imagined. She hadn't made it to New York, but she had perhaps accomplished something even more significant, helping to launch a movement that might ensure the next young black scientist wouldn't face the same barriers she had encountered. The battle was far from over, but a critical turning point had been reached. And for the first time since being denied boarding that morning, Jasmine felt something that had seemed impossible hours earlier, hope that meaningful change might actually come from this painful experience. 3 weeks after the incident at Atlanta International Airport, Jasmine Taylor stood before a different kind of audience. Instead of the science competition judges she had originally expected to address, she faced the Department of Transportation's Congressional Oversight Committee. At 17, she was their youngest ever witness. "Ms. Taylor," the committee chairperson began, "please share with us what happened when you attempted to board your flight on July 12. Jasmine's testimony was clear and powerful, delivered with the same composure she had maintained throughout the ordeal. She detailed not just her personal experience but the broader implications revealed through the subsequent investigation. This wasn't about a dress code, she concluded. This was about who gets to travel freely in America and who doesn't. This was about systems designed to maintain barriers while appearing neutral. And most importantly, this was about what happens when those systems are finally exposed. The hearing room sat in respectful silence when she finished speaking. For many committee members, this was their first direct encounter with the human impact of transportation discrimination, not as statistics on a page but as the derailed dreams of a bright young woman who had done everything right. Denise testified next, speaking not just as Jasmine's mother but in her professional capacity as FAA Inspector General. Her testimony focused on the systemic nature of the discrimination they had uncovered. The DR-7 code was merely one manifestation of a broader problem, she explained. Our investigation has identified similar coding systems at 4 other major airlines, all designed to create plausible deniability while enabling discriminatory practices. The congressional hearing represented the culmination of weeks of intensive investigation and public pressure. The outcomes had already been substantial. National Airways had implemented comprehensive reforms, including mandatory civil rights training for all customer-facing staff and the installation of independent observers at gates with histories of discrimination complaints. The airline industry, recognizing the existential threat of public boycotts and federal investigation, had formed a Transportation Equity Commission with actual enforcement powers and substantial representation from civil rights organizations. Bradley Wilson and several other gate agents identified in the investigation faced civil rights charges, with criminal conspiracy charges being considered for those who had participated in the organized discrimination scheme. Most significantly, the Department of Transportation had issued new regulations requiring transparency in all passenger screening and boarding procedures, with substantial penalties for violations. But beyond these official responses, something more profound had occurred. The incident had sparked a national conversation about the everyday discrimination faced by people of color in all aspects of public life. #ExistingWhileBlack had become more than a hashtag, it was now a movement demanding accountability across sectors. Following the congressional hearing, Jasmine and Denise returned to Atlanta. Their lives had changed in ways neither could have anticipated. Jasmine had become an unexpected civil rights advocate, receiving speaking invitations from universities and organizations nationwide. Meanwhile, Denise had been appointed to lead a special task force on transportation equity within the Department of Transportation. 2 days after the hearing, they visited Michael Barnes at his home. The retired pilot had become a crucial ally throughout the process, leveraging his industry connections and experience to support the investigation. "I never thought I'd see this kind of change in my lifetime," Michael told them, serving iced tea on his porch. "For decades, we just accepted that traveling while black meant extra scrutiny, additional questions, random searches. We adapted because we had to. But you two refused to adapt, you demanded change instead." Alexandra Rivera joined them later that afternoon. After providing critical evidence that helped crack the case, she had received multiple job offers from organizations impressed by her integrity. She had accepted a position with the Transportation Equity Commission, where her inside knowledge of airline systems would help develop more effective oversight mechanisms. "I still can't believe how much has changed in 3 weeks," Alexandra marveled. "When I first saw what was happening to Jasmine, I never imagined it would lead to industry-wide reforms." "That's how change often happens," Denise observed. "Not through carefully planned initiatives, but because someone refuses to accept injustice when they encounter it directly." The conversation was interrupted by a notification on Jasmine's phone, an email she had been anxiously awaiting. Her face broke into a wide smile as she read it. "I got in," she announced. "MIT is offering me early admission with a full scholarship." The celebration that followed was joyful but tinged with reflection. Jasmine's aerospace engineering dreams remained intact, though her path had taken an unexpected detour through civil rights advocacy. Later that evening, as mother and daughter drove home, Jasmine asked the question that had been on her mind throughout the whirlwind of the past weeks. "Do you think anything will really change long-term? Or will everyone forget about this in a few months?" Denise considered the question carefully before answering. "Systems of discrimination are deeply entrenched, and they don't disappear overnight. What we've done is create a crack in the foundation, a significant one. Whether that crack spreads depends on whether people continue applying pressure." She glanced at her daughter with pride. "But I do know this, that flight you weren't allowed to board. It might end up taking you further than any plane could have." The following weekend, Jasmine did something she hadn't done since the incident. She went to the airport. Not to fly, but to observe the subtle changes already taking place. New signage clearly displayed passenger rights in multiple languages. Independent observers monitored boarding procedures at gates with previous complaints. And most tellingly, passengers of all backgrounds moved through the terminal with the expectation of equal treatment, an expectation that was, slowly but surely, becoming reality. As she watched a young black girl excitedly boarding a flight with her family, Jasmine felt the weight of the past week simultaneously lighten and deepen. The burden of fighting discrimination remained, but it was now shared by many more shoulders than before. And in that distribution of responsibility lay the seeds of genuine, lasting change. 6 months later, National Airways invited Jasmine to speak at the inauguration of their new Civil Rights Training Center, named in honor of Michael Barnes. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience that included airline executives, federal officials, and civil rights activists, she delivered a message that captured the essence of her unexpected journey. When I was denied boarding that day, I lost the chance to present my science project about aerospace engineering. But I gained something perhaps more valuable, the understanding that no technological advancement matters if we haven't first solved the human problems of equity and dignity. The most important infrastructure isn't in our airports or aircraft, it's in our commitment to treating each person with equal respect, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The journey that began with a teenager being denied boarding had transformed into a movement with implications far beyond a single flight or airline. And while the road ahead remained long, the path toward transportation equity was clearer than it had ever been before. Jasmine's story teaches us that systemic change often begins with a single act of courage. When confronted with discrimination, the easiest path is silence, accepting injustice to avoid conflict. But real progress demands that uncomfortable moment when someone says, "This is wrong, and I won't accept it." The power dynamics in our society aren't changed through policies alone, but through individuals who refuse to be denied their dignity. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for a seat on a plane. She was fighting for equal treatment in a world where subtle discrimination remains embedded in everyday systems. This story also reveals how privilege operates. Jasmine succeeded because her mother possessed institutional knowledge and authority. For those without such advantages, justice remains elusive. That's why allies like Michael and Alexandra are crucial. They risk their comfort to stand with those directly affected. Perhaps the most important lesson is that discrimination doesn't vanish through awareness alone, it requires accountability, transparency, and continuous pressure from both individuals and institutions committed to genuine equity. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in everyday situations? How did you respond? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about fighting injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination still affects lives daily. Thank you for joining our community of people committed to creating a more just world. Together, we can transform systems of inequality one brave stand at a time.